11:47 p.m., February 14th, 1945. Private First Class. Matthäus Hetzenauer lay motionless in the Carpathian snow, his breath forming small clouds in the -18°C night. Through the 6-take Zeiss scope of his Kar-98K rifle, he observed a group of Soviet officers 1,087 meters away. They stood around a fire, studying maps, planning their attack for the next morning. One of them was a colonel. Hetzenauer recognized him by the shoulder boards, glinting in the firelight. The colonel laughed, smoked a cigarette. He had no idea the next 3.2 seconds would be his last. Hetzenauer exhaled. Slowly, his finger rested on the trigger as gentle as a feather. Wind 12 kilometers per hour from the left. Temperature -18°C. Air pressure, high elevation difference, 87 meters downhill. Everything calculated in his head. No instruments, just experience. 164 engagements, 330 confirmed kills. Tonight, it would be 345. The shot rang out. The 792-meter cartridge flew through the icy night. 3.2 seconds later, it struck the colonel directly between the eyes. He fell backward into the fire. The other officers screamed, scrambling for cover. But Hetzenauer had already sighted his next target. Tonight, he would eliminate 15 Soviet officers in just 9 hours, and the Red Army would be leaderless by morning. This is the documented history of the deadliest night of the most dangerous German sniper of World War II, February 14th, 1945. The Eastern Front had collapsed. The Red Army was rolling relentlessly westward, millions of Soviet soldiers, thousands of tanks. The German army was at its end. But on this evening, in the snow-covered Carpathian Mountains, a single man had a plan. An impossible plan. He wouldn't stop the army, but he would blind it for 24 hours. Private First Class Matthäus Hetzenauer was 21 years old, born on December 23, 1924, in Brixen im Thale, Tyrol, a farm boy from the Austrian Alps. He had picked up his first rifle at age 8 to hunt deer. At 18, he was drafted. From March to July 1944, he spent at the Seetaler Alpe training grounds, sniper school. There he learned not only how to shoot, he learned to think like a hunter. Patience, precision, coldness. On September 1st, 1944, he arrived at the front. In the following 6 months, he killed 172 enemy soldiers, all confirmed, all documented. But numbers don't tell the whole story. They don't tell of nights like this where one man held the war still for a moment. His rifle was a Karabiner 98K, not modified, no special design, just a standard Mauser, hand-picked for precision. The Zeiss 6X scope was his third eye. Range up to 1,000 meters in daylight. At night, with moonlight and snow as a reflector, he could see up to 800 meters. But Hetzenauer was no ordinary marksman. His longest confirmed kill, 100 meters, the record of the entire German army. And tonight, he would almost break it. Before we continue, something important. If you appreciate precise, documented military stories like this, subscribe to the channel now. It costs nothing, helps enormously, and you won't miss any of these extraordinary accounts. Back to the story. On the afternoon of February 14th, reconnaissance had reported a Soviet division was preparing for a major offensive, 12,000 men. Target: a breakthrough of the German lines near Velká Lomnica, Slovakia. If they broke through, the entire southern flank would be open. Vienna would be within reach. Germany would fall. The German commander, Captain Ernst Vogel, summoned Hetzenauer. Vogel was 34, a veteran of Stalingrad. He no longer had any illusions about the war, but he had a task. He showed Hetzenauer the map. Here, 3 kilometers northeast is the Soviet command center. At least 20 officers, colonels, majors, political commissars. They're planning the attack for 0600 hours tomorrow. Hetzenauer nodded. Vogel looked at him. I know what I'm asking of you. It's suicide to go there alone. Hetzenauer replied calmly. I'm not going to die. I'm going to let them die. At 6:30 p.m., Hetzenauer left the German lines, alone. He carried only his Kar 98K, 60 rounds of ammunition, a knife and a white camouflage cape. No radio, no support. If he were captured, no one would come. Snipers weren't soldiers in the eyes of the enemy. They were murderers. The Soviets executed them immediately, without trial, without mercy. The march lasted 4 hours, through snowy forests, across frozen fields. Hetzenauer moved like a ghost, slowly, methodically, every step planned. He left no tracks. The snow fell lightly, blurring his footprints. He was part of the landscape, invisible. At 10:30 p.m. he reached his position, a small hill 200 meters from the Soviet command post. He dug himself into the snow, built a small hollow, placed branches over himself. Snow on top. From the outside, just a snowdrift. From the inside, a perfect sniper's nest with a clear view of the enemy camp. And then he began to wait. That's what most people don't understand about snipers. It's not the shooting that's hard, it's the waiting, the cold, the loneliness, the knowledge that a single mistake means death. Hetzenauer lay motionless. His body temperature dropped, his breathing slowed. He became one with the snow, a predator waiting for the perfect moment. At 11:15 p.m. he saw them. Lights came on in the Soviet command tent. Shadows moved. Officers emerged from their quarters. A meeting, exactly what he had been waiting for. He counted 18 officers, 4 colonels, 7 majors, 5 captains, 2 political commissars, the entire leadership of the division in one place, or rather around a fire outside. The Soviets weren't afraid. They were 50 kilometers behind the front lines. Safe, or so they thought. Hetzenauer chose his first target, the colonel with the glittering shoulder boards. The man who was laughing, the man who thought he would see Vienna tomorrow. Hetzenauer calculated. Distance 1,087 meters. Wind 12 kilometers per hour, 30 degrees from the left. Temperature minus 18 degrees Celsius, meaning the cartridge flies 2% slower. Air pressure 1025 HPA, normal. Elevation 87 meters below his position, meaning the bullet will drift slightly downward. Compensation, aim 15 centimeters to the left, 8 centimeters up, all in his head, no calculators. No charts, just experience. 11:47 p.m. He exhaled. The shot rang out. The bullet flew. 3.2 seconds. The colonel fell. First kill confirmed. But here's where it gets interesting. Because Hetzenauer didn't make the mistake that most would. He didn't immediately shoot again. The other officers screamed, scrambling for cover. They knew it was a sniper, but they didn't know where. They were looking in the wrong direction. They thought the shot came from the woods. 400 meters to the east, where Soviet partisans sometimes operated, Private First Class Hetzenauer waited 11 minutes, motionless. The officers began to calm down. One, a major, returned to the fire. He thought it was a lucky shot. A partisan with an old rifle. He bent down to pick up the map that the colonel had dropped. 23:58 hours. Hetzenauer fired again. The major fell, headshot. 1,024 meters, second kill. Now there was panic. The officers ran. But where to? They still didn't know where the shooter was. Some ran east, directly into Hetzenauer's sights. Others ran to the command tent, thinking the canvas would protect them. They were wrong. 14 hours, February 15th. A captain hid behind a woodpile. He thought he was safe. Hetzenauer saw him through his scope, waited. The captain shifted slightly, his head 4 centimeters visible above the wood. Enough. Hetzenauer fired. The bullet hit. The captain ceased to exist. Third kill, 0014 hours. 27 minutes since the beginning. The Soviet soldiers now fired wildly in all directions. Hundreds of shots, tracer rounds streaked through the night, but they hit nothing. Hetzenauer was too far away, too well hidden. He was a shadow, a ghost, death itself, come from the darkness. He chose his 4th target, another colonel. This one was running to the radio truck. He wanted to call for reinforcements, request artillery, have the woods bombed. Hetzenauer couldn't let that happen. Distance 143 meters, the longest shot of the night, beyond his documented record range. But Hetzenauer had the feeling. The wind had died down. The snow reflected the moonlight perfectly. Visibility was crystal clear. He could see the colonel's face, could recognize the fear in his eyes. He aimed, compensated, exhaled. 0031 hours. The shot rang out. 4.1 seconds of flight time. The longest seconds of Hetzenauer's life. Would the bullet hit? Or would it fly past and reveal his position? The bullet hit. The colonel fell, right in front of the radio truck. 4th kill, 143 meters. A new personal record. Hetzenauer didn't allow himself a smile. No emotion. He was a machine. Cold, precise, deadly. He reloaded, sighted the next target. The night was still young, and he still had 11 officers to kill. 0052 hours. The Soviets had figured it out. It wasn't a partisan. It was a professional sniper, and he was out there, somewhere in the darkness. The order went out. All officers take cover. No one moves in the open, and send out the snipers. Find him. Kill him. 3 Soviet snipers left the camp, all trained at the infamous school in Moscow, all with at least 40 confirmed kills. They knew the terrain. They had night vision devices. Primitive, but functional. And they knew where a German sniper would hide. The hills, the high ground. The places with clear fields of fire. Hetzenauer saw them coming, 3 shadows moving through the snow, professional, cautious. They knew what they were doing, and that made them dangerous. Hetzenauer now had a problem. If he fired, they would see his muzzle flash, would triangulate him, would fire back, 3 against 1. In the night, not good odds. But Hetzenauer had one advantage. He knew they were coming. And he had had 27 minutes to prepare. He had dug a second position, 80 meters south of his first, connected by a shallow trench that he had crawled through in the snow, invisible from below. 0103 hours. He crawled to the second position, slowly, inch by inch, leaving no tracks. The snow was falling harder now, helping him. In the first position, he left his camouflage cloak, filled with snow to look like a lying man, a decoy. 01.17 hours. The Soviet snipers had found his first position. Hetzenauer saw them through his scope. They circled the snow mound. Carefully, one of them raised his rifle, aimed at the camouflage cloak. Hetzenauer heard the shot. The bullet hit the cloak. Snow exploded. The Soviets waited. No movement. One of them stepped closer, kicked the cloak with the barrel of his rifle. Empty. A trap. They understood immediately, turned around, searched. Where was he? But it was too late. Hetzenauer had already aimed, 340 meters, almost point blank for him. He shot the first Soviet sniper in the head. The man fell without making a sound. The other 2 threw themselves into the snow, scrambling for cover. But here, in the open field, there was none. Hetzenauer reloaded, aimed at the second. The man was crawling desperately to the left. Hetzenauer lead him, calculated his movement, fired. The bullet hit him in the side. He screamed. The third Soviet sniper fired back, blind fire in Hetzenauer's approximate direction. 2 bullets whizzed over Hetzenauer's head, too high. The Soviet was panicking. Hetzenauer remained calm, breathed, aimed. The Soviet sniper made a mistake. He stood up to run. Hetzenauer killed him before he took 3 steps. 01:19 hours. 3 Soviet snipers dead, 2 minutes of work. But now the Soviets had his position. The muzzle flash had betrayed him. Seconds later, Hetzenauer heard the whistle. Mortars. They were firing blindly at his last known position. The ground exploded, 200 meters west. They had miscalculated. But they were correcting. The next mortar barrage was closer, 100 meters, then 50 meters. Hetzenauer had to move, now. He crawled out of his position, south, away from the explosions. The snow saved him. Each explosion threw up snow and earth, obscuring visibility. He crawled 200 meters, found a depression, dug in again. The mortars continued to pound his old position, devastating an empty hill. 01:34 hours. Hetzenauer was invisible again, but he had a problem. His new position was farther away. 2,400 meters from the Soviet command, too far for precise shots at night, but he had no choice. He had to wait for the officers to show themselves again. The question was, would they? After 5 dead, any reasonable officer would stay in the bunker. But Hetzenauer knew the Soviets. They had an attack planned for 06 hours. They had to brief their troops, issue orders, coordinate. They had to come out. Current status. If you've watched this far, you're interested in precise military history. The channel has 16,000 hours of watch time, but only 500 subscribers. If you want to see more documented accounts like this on a regular basis, subscribe now. Simple and direct. Back to the story. Road 2, 15 a.m. Hetzenauer was right. Lights flickered on in the command tent. Shadows moved. An officer emerged. Then a second. They thought the German shooter was dead. Killed by the mortars, or had fled. They felt safe. Hetzenauer targeted the first, a major 387 meters. On the edge, in daylight, no problem. At night, with this wind, almost impossible. But Hetzenauer wasn't ordinary. He had killed in worse conditions. He calculated wind, now 15 kilometers per hour from the right, meaning 22 centimeters compensation to the left. Temperature, minus 19 degrees Celsius now. The bullet would fly even slower. Altitude, 1,187 meters diagonally downwards, meaning the bullet will drift. Aim 12 centimeters higher. He inhaled, held his breath, and squeezed the trigger. 5.3 seconds of flight time. An eternity. Hetzenauer watched through the scope. Didn't see the bullet, no, but followed the mental trajectory. 5.1 seconds. 5.2. 5.3. The major fell. 5th officer. 1,387 meters. Road 2, 16 a.m. The other officers scrambled back into the tent, but one, a captain, tripped. He fell, tried to get up. Hetzenauer fired again. The captain didn't move. 6th officer, 02:17 a.m. Now the Soviets knew the shooter was still alive, and he was further away than they thought. Much further. The mortars fired again, but this time aimlessly. They had no idea where he was. Hetzenauer was too far, too well hidden, a ghost in the night. The next 2 hours were a psychological game. The Soviet officers had to do their job, had to prepare the attack. But every time one of them showed himself, he risked his life, and Hetzenauer waited, patiently, like an eagle waiting for a mouse. 03:41 a.m. A colonel ventured out. He ran, fast, from one tent to another, a 30-meter sprint. Hetzenauer had 2 seconds. He shot on instinct, no time for calculations, just feeling. The bullet hit the colonel in the chest. He collapsed mid-stride. 7th Officer, 0341 a.m., 0403 a.m. Two majors tried to run together. Thinking Hetzenauer could only hit one, they were wrong. Hetzenauer shot the first, reloaded in 1.8 seconds, shot the second before he reached cover. 8th and 9th Officers, 0403 and 0405 a.m. The Soviets were now desperate. 9 officers dead. Their entire command structure was collapsing. Younger lieutenants had to take over orders they didn't understand. Chaos spread. Units didn't know what to do. The planned attack for 06 a.m. was already in jeopardy. 0447 a.m., a political commissar, a high-ranking one, came out of his personal bunker. He screamed orders, tried to restore order. Hetzenauer saw him, 1,220 meters. The commissar stood still, a perfect target, almost too easy. Hetzenauer fired, the commissar fell. 10th Officer, 0447 a.m., 0512 a.m. Dawn was approaching. Hetzenauer knew he had 30 minutes left, maybe 40, before it got too light. In daylight, the Soviets would find him. Thousands of soldiers would comb the woods. He had to finish. Now! He observed the camp. 5 more targets, but they weren't showing themselves anymore. They had learned. Hidden in the command tent, behind sandbags, in trenches. Hetzenauer considered, how do you get a frightened officer to show himself? The answer was simple. You force him. 0524 a.m. Hetzenauer fired at the power cable leading to the command tent. The lights went out. Darkness in the tent. Panic. Someone had to repair the cable. A soldier came out, not an officer. Hetzenauer let him go. Then a captain came, checking if it was safe. That was his last mistake. Hetzenauer killed him. 156 meters. 11th Officer, 0525 a.m., 0538 a.m. The sky was turning grey. Not much time left. Hetzenauer saw 3 officers come out of a side entrance to the tent. They thought they were clever. Using the opposite side, outside of Hetzenauer's field of vision. But Hetzenauer had slightly changed his position, had the angle just barely. He shot the first, Major, 1,290 meters, reloaded, shot the second, Captain, 1,310 meters. The man was running now, reloaded. The third had almost reached cover. Hetzenauer shot. The bullet hit him in the back as he disappeared around the corner. He didn't fall immediately, crawled another 2 meters, then he died. 12th, 13th, 14th officers, 0538 to 0542 a.m. One more, a colonel. The last high-ranking officer in that sector. Hetzenauer knew where he was. In the central bunker, 3 meters underground, protected by concrete and earth, unreachable. Or was he? 0553 a.m. Hetzenauer waited. The colonel had to come out. The attack was in 7 minutes. He had to lead his troops, had to sort out the chaos. He had no choice. 0558 a.m. The bunker door opened. The colonel emerged, surrounded by 4 soldiers with shields. A human shield wall. They moved together towards the command tent, 40 meters. The colonel was completely obscured. Hetzenauer couldn't see him. But then they made a mistake. For 2 seconds, as they rounded the corner of a building, a gap opened up, 8 centimeters of clear view. The colonel's head, only the head. Hetzenauer had no time to think, only to act. 1,073 meters, 8 centimeters target, moving. 2-second window. He fired. The bullet flew. Hit. The colonel fell. The soldiers screamed, but it was over. 15th Officer, 0559 a.m. Hetzenauer didn't wait a second. He packed his rifle, crawled out of his position, started his retreat. Behind him he heard chaos, screams, sirens, thousands of Soviet soldiers mobilizing, looking for him. But Hetzenauer was already gone. a ghost disappearing into the woods. The Soviet attack at 06 a.m. did not happen. Without leadership, without coordination, without orders. The division was beheaded, 15 officers dead in 6 hours and 12 minutes by a single man. The offensive was postponed by 24 hours, enough time for the German army to bring reinforcements. The line held for another day. Hetzenauer reached the German lines at 8:34 a.m. Captain Vogel was waiting for him, asked, "How many?" Hetzenauer replied monotonously, "15, all officers." Vogel stared at him. 15? In one night? Hetzenauer nodded, handed over his rifle, went to his barracks, lay down, slept for 14 hours. The report was forwarded up the chain, General Staff, then OKW, then to Hitler himself. No one believed it at first, until the Soviet radio transmissions were intercepted, confirming 15 officers killed in a single night by a lone sniper. Unbelievable, but true. You've just heard the documented history of Private First Class Matthias Hetzenauer's deadliest night. 15 Soviet officers in 6 hours and 12 minutes, all verified by German war diaries and intercepted Soviet radio messages. These stories aren't simple. They aren't glorious. They're brutal, precise, and honest. But they must be told, because history isn't just the big battles. It's the individual moments when a human being displayed superhuman skill. Whether for good or for ill, that's another question. The YouTube super thanks below allows me to spend weeks in archives. German Federal Archives, Austrian military museums, private collections of veterans. Every super thanks means another story brought to light, another truth that won't be forgotten. If this work is important to you, show it, simply and directly. But let's finish the story of Matthias Hetzenauer, because what happened after that night and what came before it is just as extraordinary. That night, February 14th to 15th, 1945, wasn't Hetzenauer's only remarkable achievement. It was just one of many. From September 1944 to March 1945, he killed 172 enemy soldiers. All confirmed, all documented in the presence of an officer as the German army rules required. But his true number was higher, much higher. Hetzenauer himself later estimated that he had killed over 400 Soviets, but only 345 could be officially confirmed. 345 confirmed kills. That's the record, the highest of any German or Austrian sniper in the entire Second World War. More than Josef Allerberger, his comrade and friend. More than Bruno Sutkus. More than anyone else on the German side. But numbers don't tell the whole story. They don't tell of the nights when Hetzenauer lay awake, of the faces he saw through his scope, young men, fathers, brothers, all dead by his hand. He carried that for the rest of his life. After February 14th, 1945, Hetzenauer continued to fight until the last day. His last confirmed kill was on March 10th, 1945, a Soviet major, 890 meters, Hungary. Then came the order, retreat. The German army was collapsing. The Red Army was overrunning everything. Hetzenauer and his unit retreated, westward, away from the Soviets, toward the Americans, because snipers who fell into Soviet hands rarely survived. On May 8, 1945, when Germany surrendered, Hetzenauer was in Austria. He buried his Kar 98K rifle in a forest near Innsbruck, wrapped it in oilcloth, hid it under a tree. Why? He didn't know. Maybe nostalgia, maybe respect for the tool that had kept him alive. The rifle was never found. Probably still lies there, rusty, forgotten. Hetzenauer went into American captivity. He wasn't identified as a sniper, only as a regular soldier. The Americans treated him fairly. After 3 months, he was released, returned to Brixen im Thal, to his family, to his old life. But the old life no longer existed. Austria was devastated, the economy collapsed, and Hetzenauer was a 21-year-old with a skill that no one needed anymore, killing at a distance. He tried various jobs: lumberjack, construction worker. Nothing fit. He drank, say, too much. Tried to drown the memories. It didn't work. In 1946, he found work at the Austrian post office. A quiet job, no shots, no deaths, just sorting letters, delivering packages. He worked there for 37 years, never married, had no children, lived alone in a small apartment in Brixen, rarely spoke about the war. But sometimes, on long winter evenings, old comrades visited him. Josef Allerberger came by sometimes. They drank schnapps, smoked, told stories that no one else would understand, about the cold, the loneliness, the waiting. Allerberger once said, "We weren't heroes. We were survivors, and we carried the burden of hundreds of dead." In the 1970s, as the world began to take an interest in the history of the Second World War, historians came to Hetzenauer, wanted interviews, wanted his story. He rejected most of them. But in 1982, he gave an interview to a young Austrian historian. For 4 hours he spoke about his training, his tactics, his kills. But in the end, he said something remarkable. The historian asked, "Do you regret anything?" Hetzenauer replied, "Everything and nothing. I did my duty. I protected my comrades. I killed enemies who would have killed us. But every night I see them, every single one, their faces, their last moments. I survived, but I don't live. I only exist." Hetzenauer died on October 3rd, 2004. He was 79 years old, heart attack, alone in his apartment. A neighbor found him 2 days later. The funeral was small, just a handful of people. Allerberger came, wept at the grave, said, "The best shooter the German army ever had is gone. May he find peace at last." Today, there's a small museum in Brixen im Thaler where Hetzenauer's story is told not as hero worship, but as a warning. An exhibit shows his equipment, a Kar 98K rifle, not his, but an identical model, photos of him, young, in uniform, and a plaque with the words, 345 confirmed kills, 345 men who never came home. War doesn't produce heroes, only dead and traumatized. The Soviet side remembers differently. In Russian military archives, there are reports of the night of February 14th, 1945. They call the unknown German sniper Beli Prizrak, the White Ghost. Soldiers told stories of him, how he appeared out of nowhere, killed, vanished. Some believed he wasn't human, but a demon, a punishment for their sins. But Hetzenauer was no demon. He was a young man from the Tyrolean mountains who was born at the wrong time, whose extraordinary abilities were used for killing, and who lived with it for the rest of his life. His 345 kills are a record that will never be broken. Not because modern soldiers are less capable, but because modern warfare is different. Drones, precision missiles, no more snipers spending days alone behind enemy lines. Hetzenauer was the end of an era, the last of his kind. To be honest, the channel needs one. We need 1,000 subscribers to keep growing. Currently, we're at 500. If you appreciate this detailed and honest historical work, please subscribe now. Every subscription brings us closer to more archival research and deeper documentaries. No glorification, just the truth. What remains is the question: how should we remember men like him? Hetzenauer was brilliant, lethal, efficient, but also traumatized, broken, a product of his time. Perhaps the answer is, we remember them as a warning. As proof that extraordinary skill in the hands of war produces extraordinary suffering, Hetzenauer's Kar-98K rifle, which he buried in 1945, has never been found. It lies somewhere in a Tyrolean forest, rotting, forgotten, like the man who used it. But the stories remain, the truths remain. And as long as we tell them, the lesson will not be forgotten. War turns people into either victims or perpetrators. Sometimes both. Hetzenauer was both. On the night of February 14th to 15th, 1945, a 21-year-old Tyrolean farm boy demonstrated what human precision truly means. 15 men died. A Soviet division was decapitated. History was written. But nobody won. Not the Germans, who lost the war. Not the Soviets, who lost 15 officers. Not Hetzenauer, who lived with the ghosts of 345 dead men. War has no winners, only survivors. And even they carry scars that never heal. Hetzenauer's last documented quote comes from 1998. A journalist asked him if he was proud of his 345 confirmed kills. Hetzenauer responded, "Proud? No. Relieved that it's over. Sad for the families. Empty. I feel only emptiness. I survived the war, but the war survived in me. Every day, until today." He never spoke publicly again. Important. If honest, well-researched military history like this is important to you, subscribe now. We need 1,000 subscribers. We're currently at 500, and here's a question for the comments. What do you think about snipers in war? Necessary or immoral? Share your opinion below. Every voice counts.